was going to make a video about normal lenses, and I had 12 normal lenses that I was going to review. I had this Pentax, this Minolta, I think another Pentax, Takumar, a few Russian lenses, a Leica lens, a Sony, etc, etc. Now, that video would have been too long, too difficult to make, or too superficial, either or. So I ended up comparing these two guys here. One is the Pentax M 50mm 1.7. I don't know if that camera is going to focus in there, but this is a special lens for me because it was my very first prime lens. Back when I started taking photos with a Pentax ME Super, I had this 50-1.7 and some 80-100 zoom lens. So this was my only prime at the time. It's not the exact copy. I bought this recently. I don't know what happened to the other one, but it's a very special lens for me because of that. The other is this Minolta Rocker X 50mm 1.7 as well. I've discovered rocker lenses very recently, in the last year or two. They are very nice and sharp. I did review a 50mm macro here, and when I did that, I was surprised at how sharp the images look, even in the viewfinder. It was amazing how the sharpness and the separation between in focus and out of focus was really nice. So that made a really nice impression. First impression for Minolta lenses for me. So these are two very similar lenses. They're extremely similar designs. They both have 6 aperture blades. They both focus to something like 45 centimeters on the closest focus. The Minolta is 55 millimeters filter diameter. The Pentax is compact like Pentax is, where is 49 only. The Pentax is from 1977 and the Minolta from 78 or 79, something like that. Still, the Pentax seems a lot, or a little bit at least, better quality. The Pentax is all metal except for the rubber in the aperture ring. And the Minolta seems a little bit more plasticky. If you know what I mean, the Minolta feels a little bit like the A lenses. This Pentax is an M lens. If you're familiar with the Pentax A ones, the generation came after this, are a little bit more plasticky than the M. And that's the way the Minolta feels. Still, it's very well made and everything turns as it should and it's very smooth, etc, etc. So it's very nice. Not quite as nicely built as the Pentax, but still perfectly good. All these photos are with the lenses mounted on the Sony a7 II, and as you see, it balances well. I think the Pentax might have the edge there because it's a little bit more compact, so it feels a little bit smaller, a little bit more like a regular lens. The adapter, you see, is not too big. Now, the advantage that the Minolta has, for me at least, is that the focusing ring rotates in the direction that I want it to rotate. I got used with Leica lenses to say rotate like this. Basically my lower finger on the lens comes towards my hand to focus closer, and that's what feels natural. And Pentax lenses rotate in the opposite direction, which it feels counterintuitive, and it takes me a little while to get used to it every time I pick up a Pentax lens now, even though I used a lot of Pentax lenses in the past. So that makes me prefer the Minolta. Image quality wise, they are again very similar. I do think that the Pentax might have a little edge on image quality, but it's not really noticeable or too noticeable. They're both sharp, full open, they're okay in the center, and they go a little bit unsharp on the edges, and that is true of both lenses. I can see it in both. If you stop down to say 4 or 5.6 or something like that, they become awesome. They're very sharp all across. The bokeh can be distracting also, again, in both lenses. We're talking about a very similar design. So you see that there's these sharp circles and it can become busy and distracting, although that's very subjective. When you stop down, you get an hexagonal pattern, and that also can be a distracting thing. Again, this is completely subjective, and sometimes it can be used for effect, or sometimes it can be distracting. The rendering of these two lenses is very similar again. Here is an example of the same photo basically, and it's pretty much the same. I took this within minutes of each other with either lens full open, and there aren't huge differences in sharpness or color rendition. This is pretty much out of the camera. I just did little levels adjustment, that's all. So no color adjustment or anything like that. Very similar rendering and very similar sharpness characteristics. You see that on the edges it goes a little bit blurry, but that's common to both lenses. So in conclusion, these are two very similar lenses from about the same era and same basic optical design, same focal length and speed, and again extremely similar in every way. Which one you pick, if you want one of them, boils down to what other lenses you have. You may have a Minolta or a Pentax adapter already, or to what you prefer in terms of say focusing ring direction, for example, or the way the lens handles and so on. I probably will use the Pentax more than the Minolta, simply because I have a lot more Pentax lenses than Minolta lenses, although I will be testing some extra Minoltas in the future. But when I want to go out with a couple of extra focal lengths, I probably take the Pentax because that's the most adapters and most different lenses I have. Anyway, that's it. For more of my photos, check out my website at juanbuehler.com, and until the next video, cheers and goodbye.